The words hit me like a slap across the face, sharp, stinging, and impossible to ignore. Donna's voice was loud, venomous, her eyes blazing as she leaned across the kitchen table, pointing her finger right at me. No wonder Vincent turned out cold. You chose war over motherhood. I froze my hands, gripping the edge of the counter, the air in the room feeling like it had been sucked out. 64 years of life, 30 years in the Marines, raising a son alone through deployment, sweat, and sacrifice, and this is what I get. My daughter-in-law standing in my own house in Connecticut, tearing into me like I was some failure of a mother. I didn't say a word. My throat tightened, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Instead, I turned, walked to the living room, and stared at the wall where my best mother and Marine badge hung. That badge polished proud, a symbol of everything I'd fought for. I reached up, unhooked it, my fingers brushing the cool metal, and without thinking, I walked out the back door. The Connecticut air was crisp, biting at my skin, but I didn't care. I grabbed a lighter from the porch, knelt by the fire pit, and set the badge ablaze. The flames licked at it, curling the edges, turning my pride to ash. I watched it burn, Donna's words echoing in my head, and something inside me broke. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. My name is Margaret, I'm 64, and this is the story of how one fight tore my family apart and forced me to face the truth about my son, my daughter-in-law, and myself. Let's start at the beginning of that day, because it wasn't just any day, it was the day everything I'd built started to crumble. I'd invited Vincent and Donna over for dinner at my place in Hartford. It was supposed to be a simple Sunday meal, something to bring us closer because things had been tense for months. Vincent, my only son, had been distant, barely calling, barely visiting. Donna, his wife of 3 years, always seemed to have a chip on her shoulder, like she was waiting for me to mess up. I thought maybe a home-cooked meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the works would smooth things over. I spent all morning in the kitchen setting the table with my good plates, even putting out the cloth napkins I hadn't used since Vincent's wedding. I wanted it to feel like family, like the old days when it was just me and him against the world. But the second they walked through the door, I knew something was off. Vincent barely looked at me, just gave a quick "Hey, Ma" before slumping onto the couch with his phone. Donna, on the other hand, was all sharp edges, her smile tight, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something to criticize. I tried to keep things light, asking about their jobs, their new apartment in New Haven, but every question got a short answer or a shrug. By the time we sat down to eat, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I tried to make conversation, asking Vincent about his promotion at the insurance firm, but Donna cut in, her voice clipped. "He's been working late every night, Margaret. Maybe if you called less, he'd have time to breathe?" I blinked, caught off guard, but I let it slide. I wasn't going to start a fight, not in my own house. But then she kept going, nitpicking everything. The food was too salty, the house was too cluttered, my stories about the Marines were repetitive. I could feel my patience fraying, but I held my tongue, focusing on my plate, trying to keep the peace. Then Vincent dropped the bomb. Out of nowhere, he looked up from his phone and said, "Ma, we're thinking about moving to Boston." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Boston. That was 3 hours away, maybe more with traffic. I'd barely seen him as it was, and now he was talking about putting even more distance between us. I tried to keep my voice steady, asking why, what was wrong with Connecticut, but Donna jumped in again, her tone sharp. "It's a better opportunity for Vincent Taylor. Not everyone wants to stay stuck in Hartford forever." That word "stuck" hit me hard. I'd raised Vincent in this town, built a life here, given him everything I had. And now I was the one making him feel stuck. I couldn't hold back anymore. I set my fork down, looked her in the eye, and said, "If Vincent feels stuck, maybe it's because you're always pushing him to be someone he's not." That's when it exploded. Donna's face turned red, and she slammed her hand on the table, making the glasses shake. "Don't you dare act like you know what's best for him. You were never there, Margaret. You were off playing soldier while Vincent was growing up alone." My stomach dropped. Playing soldier, I'd served my country, raised my son, worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, all while my husband Vincent's father was nowhere to be found. And now she was throwing it in my face. I tried to respond, but she kept going, her voice rising, the words pouring out like poison. "You think you're some hero because you wore a uniform. Vincent needed a mother, not a drill sergeant. No wonder he's so cold, so closed off. You chose war over him. That's when she said it, the line that cut me to the bone. No wonder Vincent turned out cold. You chose war over motherhood. I don't know how long I stood there, her words ringing in my ears, Vincent sitting silently, not saying a word to defend me. My whole life I'd fought to be both a Marine and a mom. I'd missed birthdays, sure, but I'd also been there for every school play, every graduation, every moment that mattered. And now, in my own kitchen, I was being told I'd failed. I couldn't look at her, couldn't look at Vincent. I turned and walked to the living room, my eyes landing on that badge. It was a gift from my unit when I retired, a small gold pin with Best Mother and Marine engraved on it. It was my proudest possession, proof that I'd done both, that I'd been enough. But in that moment, with Donna's words burning in my chest, it felt like a lie. I unhooked it from the wall, my hands moving on their own, and walked out back. The fire pit was there, full of old leaves and twigs. I didn't hesitate. I flicked the lighter, held the badge over the flames, and watched it burn. The metal warped, the words melting away, and I felt something inside me break. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years, but I felt empty, like everything I'd fought for was gone. I heard the back door creak, and Vincent's voice, quiet, uncertain. "Ma, what are you doing?" I didn't turn around, didn't answer. I just watched the flames until the badge was nothing but ash. When I finally went back inside, Donna was gone. Vincent said she'd taken the car and left, but he stayed sitting at the kitchen table looking like a stranger. I wanted to ask him if he agreed with her, if he really thought I'd failed him, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I sat across from him, the silence heavy between us, and for the first time in years, I wondered if I'd lost him for good. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Donna's words. Vincent's silence, the way the badge burned. I'd spent my life proving I could be both a soldier and a mom, but maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I'd sacrificed too much, pushed Vincent too far, turned him into someone who couldn't even stand up for me. The next morning, I called my old friend Susan, another Marine, who'd known me through my toughest years. I told her everything, expecting her to tell me to fight back, to not let Donna win. But instead, she said something I didn't expect. "Margaret, maybe it's not about who's right or wrong. Maybe it's about what Vincent needs now." Her words stuck with me, made me think about my son in a way I hadn't in years. Not as the boy I'd raised, but as the man he'd become. I decided I wasn't going to let this fight define us. I wasn't going to lose my son over one night, one argument. But I also knew I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. I had to face Donna, face Vincent, and figure out where we went from here. So I called Vincent and asked him to come over alone this time. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew it was time to stop running from the truth. Vincent showed up at my door the next Saturday looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders hunched, and his usual clean-shaven face had a scruffy shadow that made him look older than his 32 years. For a split second, I saw the little boy who used to cling to me when I came home from deployments, his small hands tugging at my uniform, begging me to stay. But that boy was gone, and the man standing in front of me was a stranger carrying a weight I hadn't noticed until now. He stepped inside my Hartford house, the same one I'd raised him in, and slumped onto the couch, staring at his hands, like they held answers he couldn't find. I sat across from him in my old armchair, the one with the frayed armrests, and felt the silence stretch between us, heavy with everything from that awful Sunday when Donna ripped into me. I wanted to demand why he'd sat there letting her tear me apart, why he hadn't said a single word to defend me, but I held back. I needed to hear him first, needed to understand what was going on in his head before I could figure out how to fix this. He didn't look at me at first, just kept his eyes on his hands, picking at a hangnail until it bled. Finally, he spoke, his voice so low I had to lean forward to catch it. "Ma, I'm sorry about what happened." Donna was out of line, but things have been rough. Rough. The word hit me like a punch. I wanted to shake him, to tell him I'd raised him alone while serving in the Marines, juggling deployments and night shifts, making sure he had food on the table and a roof over his head, all without his father's help. Rough was my life, not his. He had a good job, a wife, a life I'd worked hard to give him. But I didn't say that. I just nodded, waiting for him to keep going, because I could see there was more, something he wasn't saying. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and started talking, the words spilling out like he'd been holding them in too long. He told me about his job at the insurance firm in New Haven, how the promotion he'd gotten 6 months ago was a trap, more responsibility, longer hours, and a boss who expected him to be perfect every second. "I'm drowning, Ma," he said, his voice cracking. "Every day I'm scared I'm gonna mess up, lose it all." Then he told me about Donna, how she was pushing him to move to Boston for a better job, one that paid more but would demand everything. 14-hour days, constant travel, no time for a life. He didn't want to leave Connecticut, but he didn't know how to tell her, didn't know how to stand up to her without starting a fight. "She's got this vision of what our life should be," he said, "and I'm just trying to keep up." I listened, my hands folded in my lap, and felt a knot in my chest loosen and tighten at the same time. My son wasn't cold, wasn't the distant man Donna had accused him of being. He was breaking under the pressure, and I hadn't seen it. I'd been so caught up in my own hurt, my own need to prove I'd been a good mom, that I'd missed the signs. The late-night calls he'd stopped making, the way he barely smiled anymore, the way he'd sat silently while Donna's words cut me open. He wasn't shutting me out. He was shutting himself down, trying to hold it all together. I reached out, put my hand on his arm, and said, "Vincent, you're not letting me down. But you need to let me in. You need to talk to me, not just when things get bad, but all the time." He looked at me then, his eyes meeting mine, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were connected, like he was my son again, not some stranger I was trying to reach. But talking wasn't enough. I knew we had to deal with Donna, with what she'd said, with the wedge she'd driven between us. I asked Vincent if he'd talked to her, if she'd apologized for what she said that night, and he shook his head, his jaw tight. "She's stubborn, Ma. She thinks she was right. Thinks you weren't there for me when I was a kid." That stung, bringing back the memory of her words. "You chose war over motherhood." I'd spent my life proving I could be both a Marine and a mom, and hearing that Vincent might believe her even a little made my stomach twist. But I pushed it down, focused on him, because this wasn't about my pride anymore. It was about helping my son find his way back. I told Vincent to bring Donna over the next day, that we were going to sit down, all three of us, and hash this out. He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the door like he wanted to bolt, but I didn't give him a choice. "We're family," I said, my voice firm. "We don't run from this. You and Donna are married, and I'm your mother. We're going to figure this out, even if it's messy." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that this would blow up again. I didn't let him see it, but I was scared too, not of Donna, but of losing him, of pushing too hard and driving him away for good. The next morning I woke up early, my mind racing with what I'd say, how I'd keep things from spiraling like they did last time. I cleaned the kitchen, set out coffee mugs, tried to make the house feel welcoming, but inside I was bracing for a fight. Donna showed up at noon, her arms crossed, her face set like she was walking into battle. Vincent trailed behind her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I didn't bother with small talk, just gestured to the kitchen table, the same one where she'd screamed at me and said, "Sit. We're talking." They sat, Vincent staring at the table. Donna's eyes locked on me, daring me to start something. I took a deep breath and laid it out, my voice steady but not soft. "Donna, what you said last week hurt me. Not because I think you're right, but because it made me question everything I've done for Vincent. I've made mistakes, sure, but I've always put him first, even when I was halfway across the world. I need to know if you really believe what you said, or if you were just angry and lashing out." She didn't answer right away, just sat there, her lips pressed tight, her fingers tapping the table. Vincent shifted in his seat, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. The air was thick, like we were all holding our breath, waiting for someone to make the first move. Finally, Donna spoke, her voice lower than I expected, almost hesitant. "I was angry, Margaret. I was mad at Vincent, mad at you, mad at everything. But I meant some of it. Vincent's told me how he had to grow up fast, how he was alone a lot when you were deployed. I guess I blamed you for that, for him being the way he is. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd gotten from her before." I looked at Vincent, waiting for him to say something, to tell her she was wrong, to tell me he didn't feel that way, but he just sat there, his head bowed, like he was carrying the weight of both our mistakes. I realized then that this wasn't just about me and Donna. It was about Vincent, about the man he'd become, caught between his mother and his wife, between his past and his future. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, and said, Vincent, you need to speak up. This isn't just about what Donna thinks or what I've done. It's about you, about what you need. Tell us." He looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected to be put on the spot. For a moment I thought he'd shut down again, but then he started talking, his voice shaky but clear. "I don't know what I need, Ma. I don't want to move to Boston, don't want to keep killing myself at work, but I don't know how to stop. I feel like I'm failing both of you." Hearing him say that so raw, so lost, broke something in me. I'd spent years thinking I'd raised a strong man, someone who could handle anything, but here he was crumbling and I hadn't seen it coming. I looked at Donna, saw the way her eyes softened, and I knew she was hearing it too, maybe for the first time. I took a deep breath and said, "Vincent, you're not failing us. But you're failing yourself if you keep going like this. And Donna, if you love him, you need to listen to him, not just push him into what you think is best." She nodded, just a small dip of her head, but it was enough. We talked for hours that day, the three of us going over everything, the fight, the past, the way Vincent felt caught in the middle. It wasn't easy. Donna got defensive a few times, snapping that she was only trying to build a better life for them. Vincent admitted he'd been avoiding both of us, too scared to disappoint anyone. And I had to face my own part in it, the way I'd held on to my pride, my need to be seen as a good mom instead of seeing what Vincent was going through. It was messy, exhausting, and sometimes we went in circles, but it felt real, like we were finally getting somewhere. By the time they left, the sun was setting and I was drained, but I felt a flicker of hope. Vincent hugged me before he walked out. A real hug, not the quick half-squeeze he'd been giving me lately. Donna didn't say much, just gave me a nod, but it wasn't hostile, and I took that as progress. I stood at the door watching them drive away, and for the first time since that night I burned the badge. I thought maybe we could come back from this. But I wasn't naive. I knew one talk wasn't going to fix everything, knew Vincent was still struggling, knew Donna and I had a long way to go. That night I called my old friend Susan, the one who'd been through her own battles after the Marines. I told her everything, expecting her to say I'd done the right thing, that I'd handled it like a pro. But she was quiet for a moment, then said, "Margaret, you're doing good, but don't stop now. Vincent's got to figure out who he is, and you can't do that for him. Be there, but don't carry him." Her words stuck with me, made me think about my son, not as the boy I'd raised, but as a man who had to make his own choices. Over the next few days, I kept in touch with Vincent, checking in without pushing too hard. He told me he'd talked to Donna about Boston, told her he didn't want to go, and she'd listened, even if she wasn't happy about it. He was still stressed at work, still feeling the pressure, but he was trying, and that was something. I also started thinking about what Susan said about Vincent needing to stand on his own. I'd spent my life fighting for him, but maybe now the best thing I could do was step back just a little and let him fight for himself. But then a week later I got a call that turned everything upside down. It was Tom, Vincent's boss, the one who'd known me since Vincent was in high school. He asked me to meet him for lunch, said it was urgent. I thought maybe it was about Vincent's promotion, maybe a new opportunity, but when I saw Tom's face at the diner, I knew it was bad. "Margaret," he said, his voice heavy, "Vincent's in trouble. I don't know what's going on, but he's falling apart at work and I'm worried he's going to lose his job." My heart sank and I realized that the fight with Donna, the talk we'd had, was just the beginning. There was something deeper, something wrong with Vincent, and I had to figure out what it was before it was too late. Tom's words hit me like a freight train, sitting there in that greasy Hartford diner with my coffee going cold. Vincent, my son, the one I'd raised to be steady, reliable, was falling apart at work, and his boss was worried he might get fired. I stared at Tom, his face lined with concern, and felt my stomach twist into knots. "What do you mean falling apart?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Tom sighed, stirring his coffee, and laid it out. Vincent had been missing deadlines, showing up late, sometimes not showing up at all. Last week he'd snapped at a client something so out of character that Tom had to step in and smooth things over. "Margaret, he's not himself," Tom said, leaning forward. "I've known Vincent since he was a kid, and this isn't him. I don't want to let him go, but I need to know what's going on. You're his mom. You got any idea?" I didn't. That was the worst part, the part that made me feel like I'd failed all over again. I'd been so focused on that fight with Donna, on trying to patch things up after she tore into me, that I hadn't noticed Vincent slipping. I thought our talk last week, the one where he opened up about the pressure at work, and Donna's push for Boston had been a step forward. I thought we were getting somewhere, that he was starting to pull himself together. But now hearing this, I realized I'd missed something big, something that was eating my son alive. I thanked Tom, promised I'd talk to Vincent, and left the diner in a daze, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. How had I not seen this? How had I let it get this bad? Driving home, the Connecticut streets blurring past, I kept replaying every moment from the last few months. Vincent silences his tired eyes, the way he'd barely looked at me during that awful dinner with Donna. I chalked it up to stress, to the fight, to him being busy, but now I saw it for what it was, a warning I'd ignored. By the time I got back to my house, I was resolved. I wasn't going to wait, wasn't going to let this fester. I called Vincent and told him to come over that night. No Donna, just him. My voice must have sounded serious because he didn't argue, just said, "Okay, Ma. I'll be there." When he showed up, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. He looked worse than last time. His shirt wrinkled, his hair a mess, like he'd rolled out of bed and thrown on whatever was closest. He sat on the couch, same spot as before, and I didn't waste time. "Vincent, I met with Tom today. He's worried about you. Says you're missing work, snapping at clients, risking your job. I'm worried too. What's going on?" He didn't look at me, just stared at the floor, his jaw tight, and for a moment I thought he was going to brush me off, tell me it was nothing. But then he sighed a heavy, defeated sound and started talking, his voice low and rough. It was worse than I'd imagined. The pressure at work was crushing him, but it wasn't just the long hours or the demanding boss. It was everything: Donna's constant push for him to move to Boston, to take a job that would pay more, but demand his soul, the kind of job that would keep him on the road, away from home, with no time to breathe. He didn't want to leave. Connecticut didn't want to leave me, but he felt trapped, like he couldn't say no without letting her down. "She thinks it's what's best for us," he said, his hands twisting together. "But I don't even know what I want anymore. I just know I'm screwing everything up." Then he dropped the real bombshell, the one that made my heart stop. He didn't say it outright, but as he talked about staying out late, needing to unwind after work, I heard it in his voice, the drinking. It wasn't just a beer with the guys or a glass of wine with dinner. It was more, too much, the kind of drinking that started as a way to cope and turned into something else. He talked about nights when he'd lose track of time, end up at some bar in New Haven, driving home when he shouldn't have. "I'm not an alcoholic, Ma," he said quickly, like he was trying to convince himself. It helps me shut it all off for a while." I sat there listening, my hands gripping the arms of my chair, and felt a mix of anger and fear. Anger at myself for not seeing it sooner. Fear for what this meant for him, for his future. I didn't yell, didn't lecture, even though part of me wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he saw sense. Instead, I listened, letting him spill it all out. Every fear, every failure, every moment he'd been hiding from me and Donna. When he was done, he looked at me, his eyes red, and said, "I don't know how to fix this, Ma. I don't even know where to start." I took his hand, held it tight, and said, "You don't have to do this alone, Vincent. But you need to make a choice. You can keep running from this, keep hiding in a bottle, or you can face it. I'll be here no matter what. But you have to take the first step." He nodded, his head bowed, and I saw something in him, a spark of the old Vincent, the one who'd never backed down from a challenge, the one I'd raised to keep fighting. I told him to take a few days off work to talk to Donna, to be honest with her about what he was going through. I also told him he needed to talk to Tom, to come clean about what was happening, and ask for some time to get his head straight. "You've got people who care about you," I said, "but you've got to let us help you. No more shutting us out." He didn't promise anything. Didn't make grand declarations, but he said he'd try, and for now that was enough. The next morning I called Susan, my old Marine friend who'd seen me through my own tough times. I needed her perspective, her no-nonsense take on things, because I was out of my depth. I told her everything: Tom's warning, Vincent's confession, the drinking, the pressure from Donna. I expected her to tell me to march in and fix it, to take charge like I always had, but she surprised me. "Margaret, Vincent's not a kid anymore," she said, her voice firm but kind. "You can't fix this for him. You can love him, support him, but he's got to do the work. What he needs is someone to help him sort through the mess in his head. A counselor, a therapist, someone who's not you or Donna. I hadn't even thought about that, hadn't considered that Vincent might need more than me, more than family to get through this. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Susan gave me the name of a counselor she'd seen years ago, a guy named Dr. Twelfth. Harris, who specialized in stress and addiction. I wrote it down, my hand steady even though my mind was racing. I wasn't sure Vincent would go for it. Therapy wasn't something we talked about in our family, not when I was raising him, not in the Marines. But I knew I had to try, had to give him every chance to pull himself out of this. I also knew I couldn't do it alone, couldn't just rely on Vincent to take the leap. I needed Donna on board, needed her to see what was happening, to stop pushing him into a life he didn't want. That meant talking to her one-on-one, something I wasn't looking forward to after everything that had gone down. I called Donna that afternoon, asked her to meet me for coffee at a little place in Hartford, neutral ground. I didn't know if she'd show up, didn't know if she'd even listen, but I had to try. When she walked in, her arms crossed her face, guarded, I braced myself for a fight. But I didn't let it stop me. I sat her down, looked her in the eye and said, "Donna, this isn't about you and me. It's about Vincent. He's in trouble and we need to help him." I told her everything, Tom's call, Vincent's confession about work, the drinking, the way he was unraveling. I didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to make it sound better than it was. I just laid it out raw and real and watched her face change as I talked. At first she was defensive, her eyes narrowing like she thought I was blaming her. "He's been stressed, Margaret, but he's fine," she said, her voice tight. But as I kept going, telling her about the missed deadlines, the way Vincent had admitted he was scared of losing everything, her defenses started to crack. "I didn't know it was that bad," she said finally, her voice small, almost a whisper. "He's been so quiet, so distant. I thought it was just work, thought he was just tired." I could see she was telling the truth, that she hadn't seen it either, hadn't realized how deep Vincent was in. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side, like we both wanted the same thing for Vincent to be okay, to come back to himself. We sat there for over an hour, the coffee shop buzzing around us, and talked about what to do. I told her about Dr. Harris, about the idea of Vincent seeing a counselor, and she hesitated, her fingers twisting the napkin in her hands. "Vincent's not going to like that," she said. "He doesn't talk about his feelings, not like that." I nodded, knowing she was right, but I pushed back. "He's not talking to us either, Donna. He's shutting down, and if we don't do something, we're going to lose him, not just his job, but him. We have to try." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and after a long moment she nodded. "Okay, I'll talk to him. I'll back you up." That was a start, but I knew the real challenge was Vincent. I went home, spent the rest of the day researching Dr. Blank's Plastas and Epit. Harris, reading about what counseling could do, trying to prepare myself for the conversation I'd have to have with my son. I also thought about what Susan said about not carrying Vincent's weight for him. I'd spent my life fighting his battles, fighting to keep us afloat when he was a kid, fighting to give him a good life, fighting to keep our family together after that night with Donna. But this was different. This was a fight he had to take on, and all I could do was give him the tools, stand by him, and hope he'd use them. I decided we needed more than just a talk, more than me telling Vincent what to do. He needed to hear it from the people who cared about him, needed to see we were all in this together. So I planned something bigger, something I hadn't done before. An intervention, though, I didn't call it that in my head. I just knew we had to sit him down, all of us, and make him face what was happening. I called Donna again, told her my plan, asked her to be there. I also called Susan, asked her to come because I knew Vincent respected her, knew she'd been through her own struggles and could talk to him in a way I couldn't. They both agreed, and I set it for the next evening at my house, telling Vincent it was just dinner, nothing special, because I didn't want him to bolt before we could talk. When Vincent walked through the door, the smell of lasagna filling the house, he stopped short, his eyes narrowing as he saw Donna and Susan at the kitchen table. "What is this, Ma?" he asked, his voice sharp, his shoulders tensing like he was ready to walk right back out. I didn't flinch, just pointed to a chair. "Sit down, Vincent. We're talking." He hesitated, his jaw tight, but he sat, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes flicking between us like he was waiting for an ambush. I took a deep breath and started, my voice steady but not soft. "Vincent, we're here because we love you and we're worried. You're not yourself, not at work, not with Donna, not with me. Tom called me, told me you're risking your job. You told me yourself you're struggling, that you're drinking to cope. We're not here to judge you, but we're not going to let you keep going like this." Susan spoke next, her voice calm but direct, like she was talking to one of her old recruits. "Vincent, I've been where you are feeling like the world's caving in, like there's no way out. After the Marines, I hit a wall, started drinking, pushing people away. Talking to someone, a counselor, saved me. It's not about being weak, it's about being strong enough to face your stuff." Vincent didn't say anything, just stared at the table, but I could see his hands trembling just a little, like he was fighting to keep it together. Donna went next, her voice keyed, almost shaky. "I'm sorry, Vincent. I didn't see how bad it was, didn't see how much I was pushing you. I want us to work on this together, but you've got to let us in." She reached for his hand, but he didn't take it, just kept staring down, his face unreadable. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, and said, "Vincent, I made an appointment with Dr. Harris for next week. He's good, someone who can help you figure out what's going on, help you find a way through this. I'll drive you, I'll sit with you, whatever you need. But you have to show up. You have to try." He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, and for a moment I thought we'd lost him, thought he'd shut us out for good. But then he spoke, his voice so low I had to strain to hear it. "I don't know if I can do this, Ma. I don't know if I'm strong enough." He looked up then, his eyes red, and I saw my son. Not the man he was trying to be, not the boy I'd raised, but the person he was right now, scared and lost and trying to hold on. "You are strong enough," I said, my voice firm. "You're my son, and I've seen you face harder things than this. You don't have to do it alone, but you have to start." He didn't agree, didn't promise anything, just nodded a small jerky movement and said, "I'll think about it." It wasn't the yes I wanted, but it was something, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. We ate dinner after that. The conversation light, careful, like we were all afraid to break the fragile truce we'd reached. When Vincent and Donna left, Susan stayed helping me clean up, and she put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Margaret. He heard you, even if he doesn't show it yet." The next morning I woke up early, my mind still spinning from the night before. I called. Donna asked her how Vincent was, if he'd said anything about the appointment. She said he was quiet, hadn't talked much, but he hadn't canceled it either, which I took as a good sign. I spent the day keeping busy, mowing the lawn, fixing a leaky faucet, anything to keep my hands moving while my mind churned. I thought about Vincent as a kid, how he'd always been so determined, so stubborn, how he'd never give up on something once he set his mind to it. I had to believe that part of him was still there, that he'd find it again, even if it took time. A week later, the day of the appointment arrived, and I drove to Vincent's apartment in New Haven, my hands tight on the steering wheel. When he came out, he looked nervous, his hands shoved in his pockets, but he got in the car without a word. The drive to Dr. A.G. Harris's office was quiet, the radio filling the silence with some old rock song I barely heard. When we pulled into the parking lot, Vincent stared at the building, a small brick office with a sign out front, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. "You don't have to say anything. You're not ready to," I said. "Just go in, listen, see what it's like." He nodded, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. I watched him walk inside, my heart pounding, and sat there in the parking lot praying I'd done the right thing. He was in there for an hour, and when he came out, he didn't say much, just got in the car and said it was okay. I didn't push, didn't ask for details, just drove him home, letting him process whatever had happened. Over the next few weeks, I started to see small changes. Vincent went to counseling twice a week, started talking to Donna more, not just about the big stuff, but the little things too, like what they'd have for dinner or what show they were watching. He called Tom, told him he was working on some personal stuff, asked for a lighter workload for a while. Tom was good about it, gave him some breathing room, and Vincent started showing up to work on time, meeting deadlines, acting more like the man I knew he could be. Donna and I kept in touch, checking in about Vincent, sharing updates like a team, something I never thought we'd be. She told me she'd backed off about Boston, told Vincent they could stay in Connecticut, that she'd support whatever he wanted. It wasn't perfect. There were days when Vincent was moody, days when he didn't want to talk, days when I worried he'd slip back into old habits. But he kept going to counseling, kept trying, and that was more than I'd hoped for when this all started. Looking back, that intervention that night when we all sat him down was a turning point, not just for Vincent, but for all of us. It wasn't easy, wasn't clean, wasn't the kind of moment you see in movies where everyone cries and hugs and everything's fixed. It was messy, awkward, and scary, but it was real. It showed Vincent he wasn't alone, showed Donna and me we could work together, showed me I could still fight for my son, even if it meant letting go a little. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if Vincent would keep climbing or if he'd stumble again, but for the first time in a long time I felt like we were moving forward, like we were a family again, not just a collection of people, fighting our own battles. Spring came to Hartford, the air turning soft with the smell of blooming lilacs, and for the first time in months, I felt a lightness in my chest like I could breathe again. Vincent was doing better, not perfect, not fixed, but better in a way that felt real, like roots taking hold after a long drought. He was going to counseling with Dr. Harris twice a week, showing up to work on time, even cracking a smile now and then when he stopped by my house for coffee. He'd cut back on the drinking, not completely, but enough that I didn't see that glassy look in his eyes anymore, the one that had scared me so much. Donna and I weren't best friends, not by a long shot, but we'd found a way to coexist, to talk about Vincent without the sharp edges we used to have. She'd backed off about moving to Boston, told Vincent they could stay in Connecticut, and he'd started talking about what he wanted, not just what she or his job demanded. It wasn't the family I'd pictured when Vincent was a kid, but it was ours, and we were holding it together piece by piece. But there was still something nagging at me, something I couldn't shake, even with all the progress we'd made. It was the badge, the best mother and Marine pin I'd burned that night after Donna's words cut me open. I didn't regret it, not exactly, because in that moment, it felt like the only way to let go of the pain, to stop clinging to a version of myself that didn't fit anymore. But I missed what it stood for, the proof that I'd been both, that I'd given everything to be a soldier and a mom. The empty spot on the living room wall where it used to hang was a reminder not just of that night, but of everything we'd been through, the fight, the intervention, the slow, messy work of rebuilding. Every time I walked past it, I felt a pang, like I'd lost a part of myself in those flames. One Saturday morning, about 6 months after that awful dinner, Vincent showed up at my house unannounced, a small cardboard box in his hands. He looked nervous, his fingers tapping the edge of the box, his eyes flicking to me and then away like he wasn't sure how I'd react. "Ma, I got you something," he said, his voice quiet but steady. He handed me the box and I opened it, my hands moving slow, not sure what to expect. Inside was a badge almost identical to the one I'd burned, the gold gleaming under the kitchen light, but with one difference. Instead of Best Mother and Marine, it said Best Mom and Hero. I stared at it, my throat tight, the words blurring as I traced my finger over the engraving. I looked up at Vincent and he was smiling, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, full of warmth and something like pride. "I had it made for you," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Because you're both, Ma. You always have been, even when I didn't see it." I didn't cry, I'm a Marine, and tears don't come easy, but I felt something break open inside me, something I'd been holding on to since that night. I watched the old badge burn. I stepped forward, pulled Vincent into a hug, and held him tight, his arms wrapping around me like they used to when he was little, when I was his whole world. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick, and he just nodded, his chin resting on my shoulder. In that moment, standing in my kitchen with the morning sun streaming through the window, I felt like I'd gotten my son back, like we'd come through the fire and found something stronger on the other side. I hung the new badge on the wall that afternoon, right where the old one had been, and every time I looked at it, I thought about the journey we'd taken to get here. That night when Donna's words hit me like a slap when I burned the badge because I thought I'd failed, I felt like a lifetime ago, but it was also the spark that started everything. It forced me to face the truth about Vincent, about Donna, about myself. It pushed me to fight for my son, not just as his mom, but as someone who wouldn't let him slip away. And it showed me that family isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when you don't know if you're doing it right. Over the next few weeks, Vincent kept moving forward, small steps that added up to something real. He and Donna started going to counseling together, not just for him but for their marriage, to figure out how to talk to each other without one of them always giving in. Vincent told me about it one day when he came over to help me repaint the porch, his hands covered in white paint as he talked. "It's weird, Ma," he said, brushing sweat from his forehead. "Sitting there talking about feelings with some guy taking notes. But it's helping, I think. Donna's listening more, and I'm I'm saying what I want, not just what I think she wants to hear. I nodded, handing him a glass of iced tea, and felt a quiet pride, not just in him but in us, in what we'd built through all the mess. Work was getting better too. Vincent had a long talk with Tom, his boss, and they worked out a plan, a lighter workload for a while, fewer clients, more time to focus on the basics. Tom was good about it, said he'd always believed in Vincent, just needed him to show up like he used to. And Vincent was trying, really trying, showing up early, meeting deadlines, even taking on a small project to train new hires. He told me about it over dinner one night, his voice lighter than I'd heard in months. "It's not perfect, Ma, but it's something. I feel like I'm actually doing my job again, not just faking it." I smiled, passing him the mashed potatoes, and thought about how far he'd come, how far we'd all come. Donna and I kept talking, not every day, but enough to keep things steady. She'd call to check in, ask how I thought Vincent was doing, share little updates about their life, their new apartment in New Haven, the dog they were thinking about adopting. It wasn't warm, wasn't like we were suddenly close, but it was civil, and that was more than I'd hoped for. After that night, she screamed at me. One day, she even apologized, sort of when we met for coffee to talk about Vincent's progress. "I was wrong, Margaret," she said, stirring her latte, her eyes on the table. "I shouldn't have said those things about you, about your time in the Marines." I was mad, but that's no excuse. I nodded, took a sip of my coffee, and said, "We both said things we didn't mean. Let's just keep looking forward." It wasn't a big moment, no tears or hugs, but it was enough a step towards something better. I also started seeing Susan more, leaning on her like I had during my toughest years in the Marines. We'd meet for lunch, or she'd come over to help me in the garden, and we'd talk about Vincent, about life, about the things we'd learned the hard way. She was the one who helped me see that burning the badge wasn't a failure, but a turning point, a way of letting go of the past to make room for something new. "You didn't lose who you are, Margaret," she said one day, pulling weeds next to me in the backyard. "You just made space for who you're becoming. A mom, a fighter, but also someone who can step back, let Vincent find his own way." Her words stuck with me, made me look at that new badge on the wall and see it not just as a gift from Vincent, but as a symbol of everything we'd fought for. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel like we were building something new, not just Vincent, but all of us. He and Donna invited me over for dinner one night, a simple meal of spaghetti and garlic bread, and we sat around their small kitchen table laughing about old stories, Vincent's high school football games, the time he tried to cook for me and set off the smoke alarm. It wasn't perfect. There were still silences, still moments when I could see the strain in Vincent's eyes or the tension in Donna's smile, but it was real, and it was ours. I looked at them, my son and his wife, and thought about how close we'd come to losing this, how hard we'd fought to hold on to it. One day I was cleaning out the attic, sorting through boxes of old photos and papers, when I found a letter Vincent had written me when he was 10 during one of my deployments. It was short, scrawled in his messy kid handwriting, but it hit me hard. "Dear Ma, I miss you, but I know you're doing important stuff. I'm proud of you. Love, Vincent." I sat there, the paper crinkling in my hands, and thought about everything: his childhood, my years in the Marines, the fight with Donna, the badge I'd burned, the new one on the wall. I realized that night wasn't the end, wasn't a failure, but the start of something I hadn't seen coming. It forced me to face the truth about Vincent's struggles to rebuild my relationship with Donna, to see myself not just as a Marine or a mom, but as someone who could keep fighting, keep learning, keep loving no matter what. I brought the letter downstairs, tucked it into a frame, and hung it next to the new badge, a reminder of the boy Vincent was and the man he was becoming. Every time I looked at it, I felt a surge of gratitude for Vincent, for Donna, for Susan, for the chance to keep going. We weren't perfect, not by a long shot, but we were family, and we'd fought for each other through the anger, the pain, the fear, and come out stronger. I thought about that night I burned the badge, how it felt like the end of everything, and realized it was the beginning, the moment that pushed us to face the truth and build something better. Looking back, I see it all so clearly. The way that fight with Donna broke us open, the way Vincent's struggles forced us to come together, the way we kept showing up even when it was hard. If you're watching this, if you're going through something with your own family, don't give up. It's not about being perfect, not about having all the answers. It's about fighting for the people you love, showing up day after day, even when it feels like you're losing. Because that's what family is. It's the fight that keeps us together, the fight that makes us whole. Thank you for watching this story, for letting me share this piece of my life with you. It means everything to me to know you're out there listening, maybe going through your own battles. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if you've got a story of your own, something that's shaped you, share it with me in the comments. I want to hear it, want to know how you're fighting for what matters. Until next time, take care, keep showing up, and don't stop fighting for the people you love. If this story hit you, check out the next one on your screen. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for being here.